About a month ago, I discovered something that sent shivers down my spine. I was going through public property records at 3 in the morning when I noticed a pattern so shocking that I had to verify it 7 times before I could accept what I was looking at. What I uncovered reveals exactly why your rent keeps skyrocketing, while available rental units keep vanishing from the market. And the individuals orchestrating this are counting on you never piecing together what they've accomplished. Write in the comments, "Protect our housing rights," if you care about the future of affordable housing in New York. Let me tell you what triggered this entire investigation. Back in February, my cousin needed an apartment in Brooklyn. Decent neighborhood, nothing extravagant. Just a regular 2-bedroom unit. She discovered the ideal place, began the application paperwork, and then something bizarre occurred. The unit vanished from every listing platform within hours. Not leased out, just disappeared. So I began making inquiries. As it turned out, this wasn't a unique situation. Scores of units throughout New York City were evaporating from the rental market in identical fashion. Not getting rented, not getting purchased by homebuyers, simply vanishing without explanation. That's when I chose to investigate it personally. For the last month, I've been tracking property deals, rental postings, and official records throughout New York City. And what I discovered will fundamentally alter how you understand the housing emergency in this metropolis. The mainstream narrative you've been fed sounds something like this. Rental returns in New York have declined by roughly 10% this year. Market adjustment, nothing alarming. Completely typical economic fluctuations. But I've obtained access to information that paints a radically different picture. And I'm not referencing confidential files or unnamed informants. This is publicly accessible data that nobody's taking the time to piece together. The real drop in New York rental returns since January? 39%. More than triple what's appearing in the conventional media coverage. The Bronx has witnessed rental property valuations plummet by 51%. Queens is down 45%. Even the premium neighborhoods, like Manhattan's Upper East Side, have fallen 33%. Now, here's where things get truly bizarre. These collapses aren't occurring slowly over many months. They're occurring in abrupt, dramatic plunges that resemble nothing like ordinary market patterns. On March 17th, rental units in Brooklyn lost 19% of their worth in a single day. One day. On April 25th, properties in Queens dropped 24% overnight. On May 9th, Manhattan rentals collapsed by 17% in just 5 hours. If you've ever analyzed market mechanics, you understand that's not how natural decline functions. Markets don't simply shed a quarter of their value between sunrise and noon, unless something exceptional is taking place. These formations look precisely like orchestrated liquidations, and that prompts an unavoidable question. Who's liquidating? And even more crucially, why simultaneously? Remember back in February, when City Hall revealed that rent control expansion? The one that was meant to safeguard tenants from excessive rent hikes? At the moment, it seemed sensible, perhaps even essential. But here's what most individuals overlooked in the technical language. The expansion didn't merely limit rent increases. It imposed compliance expenses that only massive operators could realistically manage. It overwhelmed individual landlords with paperwork requirements that consumed hours every week, just to satisfy. It established licensing costs and inspection criteria that rendered small-scale property ownership financially impossible. I succeeded in obtaining the financial analysis that the mayor's administration requested before they implemented these regulations. Want to hear what their own analyst forecasted? Between 42 and 62% of small landlords would abandon the New York market within 6 months of rollout. Think about that for a moment. The regulation was crafted with the understanding that it would eliminate half of New York's small landlords. That wasn't an unintended consequence. That was the objective. So if small landlords are being deliberately forced out of the marketplace, who's acquiring all these units? Because tens of thousands of rental units don't simply evaporate. They transfer somewhere. They wind up in somebody's holdings. This is where the narrative gets genuinely fascinating. There are 3 institutional property corporations that have been absolutely gorging during this emergency: Empire Property Holdings, Metro Residential Partners, and Five Borough Rentals. Among them, they control more than 47,000 rental units throughout New York City. Now, institutional buyers purchasing property isn't questionable by itself. That's their business model. But the scheduling and synchronization of their acquisitions tells a vastly different narrative. I've dedicated the last 2 weeks charting transaction sequences from the county clerk's office, and the sequence is unmistakably evident. On March 17th, the precise same day that Brooklyn Rentals shed 19% of their worth, Empire Property Holdings acquired 362 units in that borough, all purchased within a 5-hour period, all acquired at valuations that mirrored the collapse, not the valuations from the previous day. April 25th, when Queens Properties plummeted 24% overnight, Metro Residential Partners secured 308 units. Once again, all within hours of the valuation crash. May 9th, as Manhattan Rentals lost 17% in 5 hours. Five Borough Rentals purchased 429 units across the borough. Once, that's happenstance. Twice, that's questionable. 3 times, that's orchestration. Don't click away now, because what I'm about to reveal next will show you exactly who was in the room when these policies were designed. These corporations are scooping up troubled properties at bargain basement valuations on the precise same days that prices are crashing. But here's the element that genuinely made my jaw hit the floor. When I examined the official documentation of who had been consulting the mayor's administration on the rent control regulations, guess whose names appear? Executives keep showing up in the conference transcripts. Officials from Empire Property Holdings, Metro Residential Partners, and Five Borough Rentals. They assisted in crafting the regulations that made small landlords' operations impossible to maintain. And then they utilized their financial reserves to scoop up properties from landlords who couldn't survive under the updated restrictions. Properties they acquired at enormous markdowns, because the marketplace was collapsing precisely when they were positioned to purchase. Now, you might be considering, all right, so some big corporations are purchasing property. Maybe that's not perfect, but does it genuinely matter who controls rental units as long as they're accessible to lease? And that would be a reasonable inquiry if we were discussing a normal competitive marketplace, but that's not what's being constructed here. What's being constructed is market domination. A small number of corporations controlling a commanding portion of New York's rental housing. I obtained internal planning materials from all 3 of these corporations, and their future objectives should concern anyone who leases in New York. They're designing dynamic rate systems that modify your rent in real time, based on algorithmic demand. Think surge pricing, but for your residents. They're creating behavioral surveillance that monitors tenant movements and modifies lease conditions based on your daily habits. They want bundled service contracts that compel you to purchase utilities, internet, and coverage from their corporate divisions. But the most disturbing element isn't just about what these corporations intend to do with the properties they dominate. It's about what they're scheming to do with housing regulation itself. These corporations have prepared legislation that would render individual property ownership in New York essentially impossible for regular citizens. We're discussing licensing obligations that cost more than most individuals earn in a year, compliance benchmarks that demand commercial-grade property administration platforms, tax frameworks specifically engineered to make small-scale investment economically unfeasible. And guess who's planning to present this legislation? The same administration that established the rent control expansion that sparked this entire emergency. Stay with me, because in just a moment, I'm going to show you the internal documents that prove this conspiracy was planned months in advance. Here's where their scheme began to crumble. About a month ago, a gigantic investment fund called National Housing Capital made an unforeseen maneuver. They chose to liquidate their complete New York property collection on the marketplace. 13,000 rental units, flooding the marketplace at once. Now, National Housing Capital wasn't just another institutional buyer. They were the principal financing source for the 3 corporations that had been orchestrating those calculated acquisitions. When National Housing Capital withdrew, it sparked a cash crisis that compelled all 3 New York corporations to begin liquidating properties instead of acquiring them. Abruptly, the orchestrated acquisitions that had been sustaining some stability in the marketplace just halted, and the marketplace entered absolute freefall. I've examined emergency briefing materials from late October. New York rental property valuations had plummeted 16% in a single week. Even luxury units in premium locations were shedding value daily. The emergency that was manufactured to eliminate small landlords was now threatening to obliterate the entire New York rental marketplace, and the individuals who manufactured it had no strategy for how to halt it. Here's how you recognize they're in full panic mode. The monthly rental marketplace assessments that used to be released automatically by City Hall, they've been postponed for information verification that never seems to conclude. The property deal databases that used to be openly accessible now demand special authorizations that nobody ever obtains. Even more revealing, the mayor's administration has directed all New York boroughs to cease releasing their own rental marketplace information. Local departments that used to supply comprehensive statistics about property valuations and rental returns have been instructed to designate this data as commercially confidential. I've had to assemble the actual figures from independent channels, real estate professionals, property administration firms, landlord coalitions, individuals who monitor this information because their livelihoods depend on it. And the picture they disclose is catastrophic. New York has shed more than 67,000 rental units in the last 6 months, not shed to conversion or destruction. Shed because landlords have liquidated and abandoned the marketplace completely. The surviving rental inventory is progressively dominated by a limited number of massive corporations, which means precisely what you'd anticipate. Diminished options for tenants, steeper rates for the units that survive, and a rental marketplace that's more costly and less responsive than it's been in generations. But something's occurring that nobody anticipated. The concealment is beginning to disintegrate because too many individuals have recognized what's genuinely happening. Landlord organizations are initiating legal battles against the rent control regulations. Tenant coalitions are demanding explanations about why rental selection has vanished so dramatically. Even some congressional representatives are finally posing uncomfortable inquiries about the relationships between regulation modifications and marketplace manipulation. Keep watching, because what I'm about to share next reveals the whistleblowers who are finally coming forward with proof. But the most powerful resistance is emerging from somewhere unforeseen. Real estate professionals and property specialists. The individuals who observe deal information every single day. They recognize which corporations are purchasing in synchronization, They comprehend that these marketplace collapses aren't arbitrary, and they're beginning to speak publicly. I've been approached by more than 45 real estate professionals, property administrators, and industry specialists who want to reveal what they've observed. They're supplying deal documentation, corporate correspondence, internal materials that demonstrate the orchestration between regulation choices and institutional acquisitions. More significantly, they're coordinating a unified information initiative to ensure New York voters comprehend what's been done to their housing marketplace. So here's what genuinely occurred to New York's rental marketplace. This wasn't marketplace dynamics or economic patterns or pandemic aftermath or any of the other justifications you've been hearing. This was intentional regulation manipulation, engineered to shift property control from individuals to corporations. And it was orchestrated between City Hall and institutional buyers who financed political efforts and consulted on housing regulations. The rent control expansion was never fundamentally about safeguarding tenants. It was about establishing conditions that would compel small landlords out of the marketplace. The institutional buyers who assisted in engineering these regulations then utilized their gigantic financial reserves to scoop up troubled properties at massive markdowns. They orchestrated their acquisitions to manufacture artificial marketplace collapses in particular neighborhoods, pushing valuations down even further before moving in for volume purchases. And they're now scheming to utilize their marketplace supremacy to advocate for legislation that would render their position permanent. The mayor's team is in full panic mode now because the collapse has been too extreme and too transparent. The gradual shift they arranged has become a catastrophic implosion that's impossible to conceal or dispute. But the damage is accomplished. New York has shed a massive fraction of its rental housing inventory. What survives is progressively dominated by massive corporations with monopoly authority and political leverage. The repercussions for regular New Yorkers are already apparent. Steeper rents, diminished selection, and corporate landlords with zero accountability to local neighborhoods. Before I wrap this up, let me show you the smoking gun evidence that ties all of this together. New York's upcoming election is approaching, and voters deserve to understand the reality about how this emergency was manufactured. They deserve to comprehend the relationships between housing regulations and the corporations that profited from them. If you've been impacted by New York's housing emergency, if you've witnessed rental possibilities evaporate or rates spiral beyond affordability, if you've questioned why the marketplace seems to be functioning against regular citizens rather than for them, now you understand why. Share this with everyone you know who's attempting to find housing in New York. The more individuals who comprehend what genuinely occurred, the more difficult it becomes for the individuals responsible to evade accountability. Hit that like button if this information opened your eyes to what's really happening in our city. Comment below with "Demand housing justice" to show you're ready to fight back against this corruption. Subscribe and turn on notifications for updates on how this emergency develops and what we can do to demand transparent housing regulation. Share this video with at least 3 people who rent in New York, because they need to know the truth. Because if we don't reveal the reality about what occurred to New York's rental marketplace, this same strategy will be implemented in cities throughout the entire nation. Your engagement on this video sends a message that we're paying attention, and we won't stay silent while our housing is stolen from under us.